Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Success Harbor Podcast with George Mazzaros, where it's all about making success happen for you.
Hi, everyone. This is George Mazzaros with Success Harbor, and I have Andrew Henderson with me. Andrew is the founder of Nomad Capitalist. He is a perpetual traveler, international entrepreneur, and citizen of the world. Welcome.
Well, thanks for having me, George. Great to be with you.
Thank you for being here, Andrew. You have been an entrepreneur from a very early age. That's from an interview that I watched. Can you talk about what were some of your earliest businesses, so your earliest entrepreneurial endeavors?
You know, it's interesting. People who are in the U.S. audience or the Canadian audience may be familiar with Kevin O'Leary from the show Shark Tank and Dragon's Den, when he talks about, have you ever had any successful businesses? You know, well, what's successful? Businesses that made money. And so, you know, when I was 12 years old, I guess maybe I made a little bit of money. I rode my bike up and down the street looking to, do websites back before the internet was really in existence, really, or there's anything on it for people selling their home. But when I was 19 years old, I basically dropped out of college. I was going to a school in the U.S. I barely even wanted to go, let alone did go. And I started a company that was in the broadcasting field to help people advertise their program or get their message out in a longer format, like an infomercial. And everyone said, radio is dead. Don't be in radio, let alone go into the bowels of radio and help people with this, low-end activity. And it built it into a very, very big company and worked with clients ranging from a Fortune 50 company to billion-dollar direct response companies that were, exclusive clients. After that, I've invested in all sorts of other things and helped grow businesses from, home services to, automotive stuff, import, export. I helped a guy start a financial services company. So, if you're an entrepreneur, it's like you're always thinking of, what is the business opportunity here? And so one of the things that I do when I'm traveling is I get a lot of the ringy-dingy of, here's an opportunity. They're often very simple, but there are so many opportunities out there, and I think that's kind of the entrepreneurial mindset.
So it's interesting that you mention all these businesses because a lot of people struggle just making one business work. And I interviewed, several entrepreneurs that can do it over and over and over. So what do you think, what is it that what is it that you have and some of these other entrepreneurs have that you can, it's really almost regardless of the business, but you can make it succeed. What are those characteristics?
Well, I think there's a certain amount of focus and there's a certain amount of, visualization. You have to really, visualize, what is the end goal. You have to understand what it is that the customer wants and just visualize the market. But I also think that there's just an element of, just saying, I'm going to do this and I'm going to make it work. I mean, listen, I've, run or overseen perhaps businesses in markets where there wasn't a need for an extra business, but there was a need for better businesses. And I think that's one key thing that people can take advantage of. I look at markets like the United States and I see that it's one of the most competitive entrepreneurial markets in the world. And there's a lot of markets I would not want to enter because they're way too competitive. But I also look at it and say, you know what? For someone who wants an on-the-ground business, something simple, something that's not so sexy, something not tech, for instance, there are, plenty of businesses where people are just doing a poor job. And I think that, just being able to see, that opening is the hallmark, like I said, of a serial entrepreneur. The person who can do it over and over and over again is constantly just seeing that opportunity, knowing how to execute, knowing how to put a team in place and get everything, in place. I really think that the whole aspect of being in business is the hallmark of a successful entrepreneur. Some of the minutia isn't necessarily important. In fact, I think that there are probably some entrepreneurs that should just be in the business of starting businesses and getting it set up and then walk away a year later. That may not be the most entrepreneurial thing to say, but I think that's what some people's skill set is getting things in motion, doing the big picture stuff, assembling the team and then letting someone else do the nuts and bolts as things get settled.
It's almost like, when you start a business, you're an entrepreneur, but after a while you become a manager.
Right.
And I think a lot of people don't want to be managers, especially those guys that just want to start businesses and then sell them or hire management and move on to the next challenge, so to speak.
Well, and obviously there's a dedication to continuing and to keeping things going, but I think you're absolutely right.
So I have watched an interview with you, and you had mentioned that you like to invest in unsexy businesses with cash flow. Right. You like businesses that other people don't want to be in. What are some examples of those types of businesses?
Well, yeah, and to clarify, I'm a contrarian in general. When you look at places to travel, places to live, I generally just tend to go against the grain, and I like that. But I have a club, for example, called the Nomad Society. It's a group of people who meet up all around the world, and we talk about the stuff that we do on Nomad Capitalist. And it's very important for them. Some of these guys, the most successful guys, are doing things that I would consider unsexy. They're in the garbage business, or they have parking lots. Just any kind of business that people aren't necessarily clamoring to get in. Like I said, I was in things in the home services field. At one point I looked at starting a landscaping company. Why? Because, I called 20 different people to try and get landscaping services. I didn't get a single person to answer the phone. So I look at some of these unsexy businesses, things that people often look down their nose at. Maybe someone that delivers concrete or something like that. Auto, refurbishment, car refurbishing. Anything like that. It's not, tech. It's not, supermodels sitting at the front desk. It's not, let's get on a plane and fly around the world. It's nitty gritty. I look at those and I say, first of all, the world's richest, fastest growing cultures are becoming rich, in those businesses. You go to China, you go to Southeast Asia, dedicated business cultures. That's what they're doing. They don't want something where they have a supermodel sitting at the front desk. They want something where they're getting their hands dirty, or their employees are getting their hands dirty, and it's hard work.
Do you know? Are there any unsexy location independent businesses in your experience? For those people that are listening, that they want to be location independent.
Well, obviously, I think location independent business is important, and that's a great thing for someone who wants to do what I talk about. I think that, by definition, something that's location independent is kind of sexy. It's an interesting question. Obviously, there are certain areas that everyone wants to clamor into. I would say, what is it that everyone is doing? I'm not the best, tech expert. The web is our distribution medium to a certain extent, but I'm not the web guru. I would look at where's everyone else going. I was talking to a young kid on a flight back from Sarajevo recently, who was talking about some ideas that he had for internet businesses, but then he said, I wouldn't do them because every idea I had, I would search, and there were 92 people doing it. If you can find something that no one else is doing, which is probably a hard thing to do, perhaps that's the unsexy opportunity. But obviously the whole location independent thing is about people, traveling the world and doing that. I think it's great. But in terms of building a solid business, it makes it a little more sexy.
It's funny about competition that so many people are afraid of competition. But, if you talk to venture capitalists, a lot of them won't even invest unless there is competition. They don't want to be in a business without competition a lot of times. So, there are different philosophies on that as well. Some people are really afraid of it, and others don't want to be in a business without it.
I think there's a difference between saying, listen, I'm going to start a company that's, again, in the landscaping space, and this competition is basically non-existent, and I know how to run a business and they don't. When I talk about unsexy businesses, I love getting into those fields because, yes, you're often competing against thousands of people, but it's mom and pop shops. It's guys who, they just know how to do the job, but they're kind of gruff and they don't really care about the customers. I've seen these guys in action, their thought process. It's not an entrepreneurial thought process. It's not about adding value to the market. Whereas, I look at the tech field, do I want to go and compete with Airbnb? Absolutely not. You've got some of the most brutal competition on the planet coming out of North America, whereas look at what happened in Russia with the guy who started, VKontakte, or I believe it's called, the Facebook knockoff in Russia. Russia isn't exactly a tiny country like Laos, but here's a guy who said, here's the Facebook model. I'm going to rip it off and do it in Russia. That's what I talk about doing overseas, and we can get into that later. But that's why I'm not a huge competition fan in sexier businesses.
You wrote, this is on your website,
Yep.
You wrote that your mission is simple: find the best places to live, start a business, and invest. In your opinion, what are some of the best places to live and do business today?
Well, I just spent about 5 months traveling through Europe, Eastern, Southeastern Europe. I was admittedly underwhelmed. I think there are some opportunities there, but I also think that the market probably wouldn't want to take advantage of all the things that you could bring there. I'm extremely bullish on Asia and Southeast Asia. I think China is fantastic. It's a great business culture. Certainly, they've got enough people there. It would be tougher. You go to Vietnam, you go to Cambodia is one of my favorites. Even Malaysia, perhaps Indonesia. Those are places that are, booming, and you can run a business pretty easily. The people there are pretty open to you coming. For example, in places like, Cambodia, I was in a store, any grocery store, trying to buy food or trying to buy shampoo. Everything is in French or English because there's just not this great need to print things in the local language in Khmer. And people don't really want things necessarily in Khmer. I mean, if someone's going to go to like a Western-style grocery store, they want something in French. That's the level of quality, an indicator of quality. That's a country where, you can enter the market and it's just there's just such an ease to it. Over time, that will dilute. But, I mean, I look at markets in Asia. They're booming. They like foreign stuff. They don't have a lot of that foreign stuff. There's not a lot of competition. Colombia in South America is one that everyone is talking about in my circle. It's the number 2 most free economy in South America. And I love countries like that because, again, it's the contrarian angle. I was just at a dinner last night with some friends who are very intelligent people. They read the news. They know what's going on. But, what do they say? Oh, yeah, all the drug money running through there. It's really not what's going on anymore. It's just like people saying, Vietnam is getting attacked by the U.S. forces, or, Cambodia, look at what happened there. Or Nicaragua, people say, they had a civil war. All this stuff happened 30 years ago. People still think it's happening, and therefore, that makes it easier to go in and do business. So those are probably 5 of my favorite places.
Okay. Yeah. I just wanted to bring this up as a side note. What do you think of the fact that only about a third of Americans actually have passports, and that number should actually be a lot smaller? It's only bigger because now we have to have passports to go to Mexico and Canada.
Right.
Before we needed that, it was only maybe about 20-25%, and that to me is important because it feels like that Americans are so misinformed a lot of times, and I think that's maybe because they don't travel so much. But why do you think that number is so small?
Well, I have to say, I never complain. As an entrepreneur, I never complain about reality. I'm merely trying to work around it. I'm having a conference, our Passport to Freedom conference in Cancun. We had the best attended conference in the offshore world last year, and now I'm saying, you know what? We're just going to Mexico, and people who aren't with us, they just won't be able to come. Why is it? I mean, listen, I think that the U.S. government and just U.S. society has done the best job of any culture on earth of brainwashing its citizens. Again, I was at a dinner with some friends, and they're asking me, what are the laws for property in Mexico? What are the rules to buy property? And then they said, well, I hear in the United States that there are squatters who can come in and sit in your property and take over, and you can't get rid of them. And I have to imagine it's really bad in Mexico, too. It's like, well, hold on a second. You're saying Mexico is so bad because the United States is so bad and it has to be the same. Well, no, it only means the United States is bad. Yet there's just this brainwashing, perhaps because it's so isolated, there's not a lot of countries surrounding it, that it's the best country, nothing else can be worse. Look, I saw something the other day. Most Americans learn about how good the government is from their government. So what does that mean? It means they're not going to be very critical thinkers. When I go around the world, you go to a place like China, they realize the problems with government, and they're trying to get around that. In the U.S., it's this thing of it's bad, but we're still the best place on earth. I think that's bad for entrepreneurship. No one ever wants to leave. No one ever wants to explore because they think it can't get any better. Why don't people travel? I don't know. There's so much to see. Why leave the perfect country? We've got it all right here,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What do you say to those that that feel that it's very difficult and sometimes even impossible to do business in a foreign environment? I mean, you mentioned Laos, Cambodia, or some of these other places, and you don't speak the language, you have no idea about the culture. How do you even go about starting a business, or even if you just want to invest in a business? What advice do you have for those?
Well, I mean, you've got some of these places. I mean, my gosh, Vietnam. My friend Dan Andrews, where I'm always mentioning this on interviews, but I mean, he lived there for a long time, and he thinks that really the English is catching up with that of, say, the Philippines, which is another economy. If you can tolerate some of the things that the pace there, it's probably not a bad place. But I mean, Vietnam. Is he right? I don't know, but certainly English is really coming to the forefront there. I have lots of friends in Vietnam I'm talking to about what's going on. They speak perfect English. They're working in jobs, doing sales. They're doing stuff catering to expats, some of them, but some of them are also just catering to the local market, and they just happen to be bilingual. That's a growing thing. So I think English speaking is growing. Look, obviously there are certain economies that are more welcoming than others, but I think by focusing on smaller, underappreciated, underrated economies, you'll have a better chance for success. It's just like anything else. I mean, listen, no business is 100% perfect. No business is 100% easy. But I look at trading the challenges of lots of competition, high costs, high regulations, all the things that I've seen, even in very simple businesses. All right, you get rid of all that, and then you go and you have to deal with a little bit of culture shock. I mean, that's your business as an entrepreneur. You got to be on the ground. You got to know how things work. I mean, that's your intelligence. That's how you have to propel things forward. It's understanding the market. I mean, obviously, you need to know what the market is for your business to make sure it works. But for me, trading all the nonsense in the Western world for a little bit of a learning curve that you could shorten by bringing on a foreign partner, by bringing on an expat who's lived there, to me, it's a pretty good trade-off. So, I look at some of these economies and I see that there are things that are so desperately needed or wanted that the learning curve is probably pretty short because there's stuff that you've been familiar with for 30 years that they want but don't have.
Yeah, I mean, America was kind of built on that whole concept, but somehow it's just not in the culture anymore, or not so much. It was about going to places that were unknown to you and actually making it. It wasn't really about trying to find a job. It was about really building a life for yourself.
It's funny that everything that I mean, here we go. What do people do? They say, God bless the founding fathers and God bless the pilgrims and all that. If without them we'd have no country. And then they say, well, I can't believe all these people all these expats. They want to leave the country. They want to go somewhere else. I can't believe these people. It's like, well, wait a second. The people that you admire so much, they took a risk. They went somewhere new. They did something different. They said, you know what? Our country, the way things are, it's not working. So we're going to go and do something different. And then they made it, and they figured it out. That's exactly what the opportunity is right now. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's the easiest thing in the world. But, you have to go and you have to figure out. The question is, does the potential reward outweigh, the costs? And I think that for someone who wants to be in business, I mean, yes.
So let's talk about Nomad Capitalist. When you started it, what were your goals with Nomad Capitalist? And what year did you start it?
It's almost 2 years old now. I'm an investor. I'm like I said, an entrepreneur. I love the idea of investing in other businesses. I've done that, with a pretty good amount of success in the United States. I mean, I've never had a business that lost money. So, I wanted to go around the world and replicate that model. I started, writing about it for fun. And it was, interesting. Within 10 or 11 months, we had 250,000 people that month come to our site. And it's like, okay, wow, this is, people are clamoring for something. And that's when we decided to host a conference and have Peter Schiff come. And we had, I think, like I said, the biggest, best attended conference in this space of the year. And I never expected that to happen, though. I just figured, I'm going to go around and I'm going to figure out where to invest my money in Laos. And ultimately, it worked out well for me because I am still doing some of that stuff, not as much as I had originally thought. But there are so many opportunities that being the guy to aggregate them is I think, just as interesting because, practically everywhere I turn, there's something interesting going on.
So how do you? There are other sites out there that talk about similar things, but you managed to build quite a large following. So what do you think is the difference between your site and other sites? How do you promote Nomad Capitalist? What do you think makes the difference?
Well, I look at, on the internet, certainly, if you have a quality product, people are going to find it. And that's just the nature of the internet or really anything. I look at it as a business. And, there's always ways to differentiate your business. We were just talking the other day about the real estate market. Look at real estate agents. When the market's on fire, they say, you got to get in, that's on fire. You'll never be able to get in these prices again. It's going nowhere but up. And then when the market crashes, they say, well, you look at these all-time lows. You have to get in now. There's always different ways to pitch something. I've chosen to come out and be totally transparent and say, here's who I am. I'm going to do videos. I'm going to show my face at conferences. I'm going to be, an authentic guy with a real story. I'm going to come on and do interviews and talk to people and share the information. And that's my business model. I feel that people want transparency. They want to know someone who they can like. And I'm sure some people don't like me. Just like any business, my model doesn't appeal to everyone. I chose that because not only I think it's the right thing to do, I think it's the right way to build trust, but I also think that, as a business model, it differentiates me from guys who, want to, use pseudonyms and not show their face. And there's multiple guys who do that. Or guys who it's just an amalgamation, kind of a faceless entity of guys who, they're all just writing about how to go and live on a beach somewhere. Look, I wanted to do something personality based. And so that's a business decision is, again, you could do it with any other company. You could, you could run like I said, a landscaping company where, hey, I'm Andrew. I'm the owner of the landscaping company. Here I am on the website with my big, face, and here's my wife and my kids. Or you could just be the guy who's behind the scenes. What strategy do you think is appropriate for that business? There's always a strategy that appeals to some section of the market.
So you were published in the Washington Post, the Huffington Post, and several other A-list publications. Yeah. What advice do you have for our audience to get into those types of publications? What should they do? What gets you noticed?
Well, I hate to sound like an online entrepreneur when I say this, because I think that there's a lot of hype online where it's just like, if you just do good will happen to you. And that's not always the case. You have to go out and create action in business. I think in those cases, when we weren't looking for it, it actually happened. I think that, the lesson perhaps isn't as touchy-feely as some online people would want to say, that if you just, it's good karma. But that, when you're out there just running your business effectively and focusing on what it is that people want, then people who want it are going to find it. And some of those people are going to be from the Huffington Post, from the Blaze, from the Business Journal, from, wherever else. And so, what is the audience that you're trying to reach? Now, am I a little bit surprised to be on the Huffington Post? Perhaps. But, I ultimately think, look at what I do. I'm a personality-based kind of site where I'm out there, where perhaps I'm an easier target, for better or for worse, for people who want to say, oh, here's what the offshore world is talking about. And here's what people who are investing overseas or leaving the United States are talking about. Here's a guy we can, pin this on. So I think that your strategy is probably important into, do you want to be recognized? What's important? I would argue that someone like myself was more accessible, who they can point to and say, here's this guy. Look at that guy with his tie and he's stuffy and he's, he looks like an offshore guy. I mean, that maybe makes me more of a target and gives me more publicity than guys who, they don't want to be as accessible. So I think it's all in your strategy. But, I mean, focusing on what the market wants what the market wants, the people in your market will find it. They'll like it. People outside of your market may publicize it in a bad way. But, I mean, I think it's all good.
So basically these publications then find you as opposed to you doing outreach and push your story onto them, so to speak?
Yeah, I'm a big, believer in doing PR and getting the message out. I mean, I've run businesses where it's all outbound, and we're reaching out to people because you have to. But in this case, people have all come to me. We've written stuff that was quotable or that made an interesting point or that was controversial. And I think, by the way, I think you should apply that in any business. I have a friend who I helped start a financial services business. They do a couple $1 million over the last couple of years, and just kind of a small boutique service. And I said, listen, one of you guys is kind of a more straight, centrist kind of middle of the road guy, doesn't get too uptight, pretty laid back. The other guy's really politically conservative in the U.S. I said, you guys, you're doing a radio show. You got your website, you got your blogs. You guys should be like the yin and yang. One of you should be screaming and yelling about the Democrats and how it's all going to pot, and then the other one should be more level-headed and center of the road. And the center of the road guy will attract center of the road guys, and the screaming and yelling guy will attract the people who are really fed up with what's going on, and they're the Tea Party types, for instance. I think having an identity is important. Having a brand identity. Trying to be milquetoast isn't going to work.
Yeah. I am very interested in the first 1 to 2 years of business. So I try to ask this of everyone that I interview. What do you think is the most important thing for entrepreneurs to do during the first 12 months of being in business? What do you think they should focus on most of their energies?
Well, I mean, I think, whatever has to be done to totally dominate that market. And I think, for me, especially in an on-the-ground business, that's somewhere I would want to be getting the message out. But I think that, let's look at like a foundation. Okay, you're building a house. I think a lot of people focus on stuff that's not important or that's later in the building process. What is a foundation in a business? You need a team. Maybe you're starting a business with just yourself, but then you need the team. You need to build the team. I see so many entrepreneurs, especially in these smaller or unsexier businesses, where they have no clue on how to hire. They just ad hoc hire. They hire the first person who calls them. They don't really know the proper techniques. So what's the foundation? It's hiring. It's getting the basic marketing practices into place that are scalable. It's getting everything into place that can be scaled. And you have to realize, you are in business. When I talk to entrepreneurs around the world, they seem to think, well, I'm in this business, so I'm not really in business. No, if you're going to grow a scalable business that's going to grow, you have to have the proper people in place. Because one person, when I started a business, like I said, the home services, we hired one guy. I basically made him the manager, and I just sat back and let him, somewhat run stuff. If he would have screwed up, the whole thing would have tanked. I wouldn't have made, 2,200% return in 13 or 14 months running that business because the rest of the team grew from that. So you have to look at it like you gotta be, HR, you gotta be marketing, you gotta understand the best practices in all those aspects of business. Because if you're not, you're just gonna get squashed.
Okay. Also, I'm very interested in being productive, especially, when you start a business first couple of years. What do you think is the biggest time waster for entrepreneurs?
It's a good question. I think people who, again, are focusing on the wrong things. I see people who, and again, this is why I talk about unsexy businesses. People get into these businesses that's like they like the glitz and the glamour, and then they go and they focus on all the wrong things. They focus on, doing too many things at once. I look at, what's the singular goal? Make a list of goals and go through them one at a time. Singular focus, simple goals, big impactful goals. All the stuff on the periphery, that's hard to define what that could be in someone's business. But if you don't have tunnel vision and you're not laser focused on what's going on and achieving, one main thing, I think that's a problem. Too many distractions, not enough focus. We can all suffer from that at some point, and we are, entrepreneurs, so probably an ADHD or OCD lot, but you got to be super focused. That's, this is probably as specific as I can be for just any business in general.
Okay. Now, if somebody came to you, let's say a friend or a family member, and they saw your success as an entrepreneur, especially, for you as, trying to do business or doing business, all over the world, what do you think is the best or the best advice you could give that person if they want to replicate your success?
Well, I think everyone replicates success in their own way or differently. What I've done is a measure of my personality. I've started things. Some have lasted for years. Some lasted a year, and then they were sold. So I really fit that more serial entrepreneur build. On the other hand, I know people who have started one business and have made, $5-10 million businesses. People who you wouldn't think that person's a natural entrepreneur, but you look at it and they may not be as good at going and starting a business every year, but they have the staying power. So you have to figure out, what is it that you're doing? If you're really passionate about something, you just want to do it for 25 years, 30, 40 years, and you have the ability to execute on that one concept, that's important. The best advice is just to go out and do it. That's what entrepreneurship is, go out and do something. For me personally, I never really had a job. So when I was 19, I was able to start a business, and, I love a cash flow business, like I said. How can I bring in cash right away? What does that involve? It involves doing things most people don't want to do. I'm all for internet businesses, but, you look at people who I know dozens of guys who have made tons of money online, and I've met all the people who are trying to be like them. If it's hard to make $1,000 or $2,000 a month online, find a way to pick up the phone and sell people, because that's what I did, and made money instantly. So get out of your comfort zone. That's what you have to do. If you're online, how can you think of it as not just an online business? We have an online business, but we also sell things, B2B or on the phone. And if all we did was think about e-commerce and shopping carts, we'd miss out on tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes a month, in opportunities, because we're not a business that picks up the phone. We do all things with clicks. No. So the point is, get started doing something, get it in motion, and figure out a way to bring in the money very quickly. That's the only way you have to succeed. And whatever you have to do to bring the money in, phone, emails, reaching out to people, going to conferences, whatever.
Sounds good. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with our audience today, Andrew. How can people connect with you or find out more about Nomad Capitalist?
Well, they can go to the website, of course, Nomad Capitalist. We've got some free materials that we give out that goes into a lot of depth, actually, perhaps too much depth, on some of the countries, for example, that I like, and for different things. I really believe in using countries for different purposes. So if someone says, we should just move from the U.S. and then go to Australia and do everything in Australia, that's not what I really believe in. I believe in diversifying around the world. But they go to nomadcapitalist.com. They can learn more. I think we've got a special offer when they sign up for the newsletter, which is free. And then, we've got conferences, around the world, like this Passport to Freedom conference, which is a great way to meet other people and network and learn this stuff. But, as with any business, just getting started is the most important element.
Well, Andrew, thank you very much. I appreciate your time today. I learned a lot from you, and I'm sure our audience as well, and I wish you much success with Nomad Capitalist and your travels.
Thanks so much, George.
Thank you.